Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next podcast. We're here with Daniel again. And Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. How are you?
Fantastic, fantastic. So it's a great pleasure to have you back. And we're really going to talk about how to use ChatGPT in terms of macros in Excel and, financial analysis. And yeah, it's really over to you, really.
No, that's great. Happy to show. So let me share my screen over here. Before I actually have this create a macro, I want to talk to a couple foundational concepts over here about just general macro creation. So if you could see my screen here, I just have a Visio
Yes,
diagram over here.
yes,
And one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they start getting into AI is, they ask a question and not necessarily realizing that a question can be very vague or broad. And how AI is designed right now. And I say right now because I'm sure over time, as it gets refined, it'll change a bit. Is that you ask a question or tell it to do something, it's going to go do something. And if it doesn't have enough information to do it, it's going to make some assumptions on what it thinks that you mean by your question. So, suppose you type into, ChatGPT, I want you to, render a web page that puts a square, just a simple task. I'd want a square on the screen, right? It says, okay, I'm going to put the square, but how big is the square? Is it gonna go create something that's this big and you wanted a small square? Is it going to create it in blue and you wanted it in green or red? So just by asking, questions, and we as humans make certain assumptions. We may assume things a certain way versus a computer, or if a customer came to me, or I'm sure the same for you, Tim, and they say, hey, I want you to go and implement the system that does these five things. You're not going to just go and often build it and say, hey, is this what you wanted? You're going to start asking some clarifying questions. You're going to say, all right, well, you want the square on the screen. How big is the square? What color do you want it? You're going to essentially define out those requirements. So back to our conversation a few weeks back, we talked about the concept of prompt engineering, and that's going to be something that's going to be very big, at least in the immediate term, until the AI gets to a point where it
yeah,
can say, "Hey, I understand that you wanted me to draw a square on the screen, but before I do it, I just have to ask you these, five questions, or whatever it is." And we went through something very basic of, kind of color, size, and shape on there. But as you get to more complex things, like I want you to build me a financial model, well,
mhm,
there's a very big difference between a financial model that takes two parameters and one that takes 200 parameters.
sure,
So, the more specific and the more detail that you're able to give, the better the output that you're going to get. It reminds you of when I was in elementary school. We did an exercise on, the teacher said, "Hey, write out with instructions how to brush your teeth." And you say, "All right, take the toothpaste and put it on the toothbrush." And she takes the container of the toothpaste and just puts it on the toothbrush. Because it's an exercise of, the more
yeah,
specific you are, the better your answer and your output's going to be. So
sure.
I'm just going to go through a few examples today, of pretty much a similar, or very basic, problem, just to show you, hey, here's what your output is if you're
Yes,
not specific in what you're asking ChatGPT to do in terms of writing a macro in Excel, and then how can we improve that output.
sure.
So I'm just going to close my screen over here. And what I have up now is an Excel sheet where we're just looking to do some very basic calculations. Take a principal amount, multiply it by an interest rate to get to an annual payment. And so I'm going to pull up the prompts that I pulled into here. Pull that up. And essentially, what I did was I told ChatGPT, please write an Excel macro. It takes a principal amount, multiplies it by an interest rate to determine an annual interest amount. Sounds like it could be pretty clear, right? But we'll talk through, kind of the assumptions that it's making in the macro, and why this, this isn't going to work. Just to give a little spoiler over here.
No, sure.
So, it gives a whole answer with explanation. Here's your code. Here's how you go and run this. I pulled it into my Excel workbook.
Oh, do you have the screen? Are you sharing the screen as such?
Oh, is it not showing the?
No,
Okay,
that's okay. So thank you.
I think I shared the tab instead of the.
Sure.
Right. Do you see my
Thank
Excel
you.
screen now?
Yes, I can. Thank
Okay,
you so
perfect.
much.
So all I did was I put some sample data in here, and we'll talk a little bit about, how we can generate some sample data using ChatGPT as well. A great use case for it is you can say, hey, I want to create an example of this. Can you give me 5 lines of sample data for it? It'll output it. It's much better than how I used to do this 5, 10 years ago of, just having random number calculations in
Yes, yeah,
Excel that we had to copy and paste in here. But so essentially, I have five records over here, just different amounts, different interest rates, and then the annual payment. And when I click the button, nothing's going to happen. I'm going to get an error box over here, and the reason why is because I wasn't specific enough in what I told ChatGPT to do.
sure.
So let me pull up code that we have here. And, essentially we're just going to look at this last button click over here. What happened was I didn't tell, even though I told it what the amount I wanted to multiply by the other amount was, I didn't tell it where in the sheet that
Right.
this was going to be, right? So it automatically assumed that my principal amount was going to be in A1. It automatically assumed
Mm,
that my interest rate was going to be in B2, and it automatically assumed that it was going to put the result in C1 over there. And as we go through, we see that these are text fields in A1, B1, and C1. I didn't tell
sure.
it where my data started. I didn't tell it, where I was expecting the result, and I didn't tell it how many results I was expecting. So here's an example of, ChatGPT did exactly what I told it to do, but I didn't get the results I expected. And if I were given a feedback form at the end of this and said, "Hey, how would you rate how ChatGPT did?" I would say, "Oh, ChatGPT is not very good," right? When
Yeah.
in reality, it's not that the technology isn't good; it's that I didn't know how to use it.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so we can jump into, like maybe a better way of being able to do something like this. And I'll pull up this other tab that I had and just scroll to the top here. So essentially, I gave it some parameters where everything that you saw in the book was actually generated by ChatGPT, even the example we're going over today. So I
Sure.
just told it that I'm creating a podcast episode, and I want a use case. I want to input bad information to you and get a horrible result, and I want to be able to refine it and get to a better answer. And it gave me, here's the examples that you can have.
Right.
And I said, all right, can you create some sample data to analyze, so that way
Fantastic.
I didn't have to go and start doing random number generators and
Yeah.
and, tagging them in there.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a sample data set with principal amounts, interest rates, and the next example we'll go through a little bit over here is going to be, instead of taking an annual amount, let's make it a little more complex. Let's calculate an interest rate over a certain number of quarters and what that value is going to be. And it, gives me each of these fields, and it gives me all the inputs for me. So, where
Fantastic.
I used to have to, Google for sample data sets, or,
Yeah.
like I said, use random number generators to start plugging everything in. Now I can just ask it to generate this. And
Yeah.
it gave me 5 rows. I could say, hey, can you create 10 more rows for me. It'll do it over and over again. Just the thing to keep in mind is if like you're looking for a massive data set, like, hundreds or thousands of rows over here, you may have to ask it in pieces where it may not, give that all to you
Sure.
in one answer. So it gives me the data set, it explains what everything means, and it tells me, hey, here's the analysis that I intend to do.
Sure.
So now I ask it, okay, I need an Excel macro, and here's what we're calculating: quarterly compound interest rate for a portfolio. Column A is going to have the amount, column B is going to have the interest rate, and column C is going to have the number of quarters. Data starts in row 2, right? So this gets us past that issue that we ran into when we did this, the quote unquote bad way,
Sure.
where it's not going to start trying to add and multiply text fields together. And I want the result of the formula to be in column D.
Yes.
So now it goes and it gives me, my formula. And as we go through, we can see that it still makes some assumptions. I could have done even better with how I prompted it, where on the macro it's plugging in, it's assuming sheet 1 is the name of the sheet that we're going to run this on.
Sure. Sure.
So as I went through, I did have to make one tweak when I copy and pasted the code into my macro over there.
Sure.
But as you see, nothing's hard coded in terms of the cells we have, and it gave
Mm,
me something that's very dynamic, where
dynamic. Yeah.
it's not going to just work for the 5 rows that are in there. I could go and add 10 more rows, and it's going to automatically
Do that. Yeah.
populate over there. So
Yes.
I'm just going to jump to my sheet called better, and when I run my macro, it's going to give me all my results, and it gives me a little pop-up here saying that it calculated it, so I know that it's finished. And we go and we look and we see, okay, now we have all of our numbers in the field over here. Now,
Yeah.
this is great where we get to our result, but the question that would up in my mind is, if I'm going and handing this to a client and they just see 11,025, how did they know that this is the right value? They
Sure.
may have to calculate it, on their end, but how do we have that transparency? So an even better way, instead of having macro code, calculating things behind the scenes and get the answer, wouldn't it be great if we could have the macro paste a formula into each of these
Right.
cells, so that way it gives the customer the full transparency and visibility, even if they don't know how to write a macro or look at code, on getting to the answer.
Sure.
So the third way that we went through over here, that you know I'll walk through here in a second, is instead of writing the end result to column D and doing our calculation inside the macro, can you write a formula that'll be placed in column D to calculate the results? So it went through the formula. It gave me the code to go and write this. And originally I ran it and I saw that my numbers didn't match. I said, hey, look, I would expect this me doing it the second time over here to get the same results as the first time, just with formulas instead. And when I didn't get the results that I expected, all I did was tell ChatGPT, hey, look, I didn't get the results that I got from the previous example. And it went through, it said, you're right, I found my issue here, it is. And it went
Uh,
and corrected its own code, so that way when we go and run this the third time with on our even better tab, we get to the same answers, except this time it's going and it's pasting formulas in here. So that
right.
way, my end customer knows that, that this is exactly how I got to the answer, and they could double check the math behind it to make sure that I did the right thing.
And that's
Um,
useful, really, especially if you're doing forecasting or showing auditors or something, because we
mhm.
get financial data from systems and we manipulate in some maybe other way or, ad hoc way. So this gives you that, like or smart view or whatever, and then you can see what's going behind it as a. They don't have to go through
Sure.
all the things. So it's quite simple. Well, prompts really. Yeah.
Right, because I could probably count on one hand the number of times that I've given, numbers to a client and they didn't say, "Hey, how did you get to this number?" or
Sure.
"Let me double check that to make sure that it's right," as,
Mm,
as they should. You never should just take the word of somebody that numbers are good. You should do your own analysis and checking. But in that case, I say, all right, here, let's open up a VBA macro editor. And a lot of finance professionals I work with are tech savvy and
yeah, of
can
course.
go in there and
Mm,
look at macros in there. But there are also the people that maybe at higher levels of the organization that don't write macro code on a daily
exactly.
basis, and they're looking at this and saying, hey, why are you showing me code? I just want to understand how you got to the formula. And that's
Fantastic. Yeah.
perfectly fine. And happens every day. A lot of successful people are in high positions that just don't know how to write macros because they haven't had to. So you want to make sure that how do we lower the curve of the tech curve of what
Sure.
skills and experiences someone needs to have in order to be able to validate and check this. And
Yeah.
as you go through, you're going to learn that I always recommend, like, hey, start by just starting. You don't have to have the perfect prompt to type in there. You're
Yeah.
going to see over time how you can improve your values. Like, one thing I can see just straight off the bat is, hey, we got to our numbers here, but we don't have any formatting, right? There are no commas
Yeah.
separating,
Yeah. Of
thousands. There
course.
are no dollar signs in here,
Yeah.
whatever. And again, that's the result of the more detail that you give to ChatGPT or any AI model that you're using to create any of these calculations, macros, whatever, the more it's going to be able to get to exactly what it is that you want. You just have to be good at describing, here's everything I want. And once you realize that, hey, there's additional stuff that I would like, hey, let's put commas in here, let's put dollar signs, whatever. You can then even go in and say, this is great, now let's format these cells so that they have commas and dollar signs and whatever else they highlight them in blue if if the value is greater than 10,000 or anything like that. And it'll be able to.
Completely. Yeah.
And,
I mean, I can see another use for this because I used to do coding of HFM rules and stuff, and they used to say, where does that figure come from, or things like that.
Mhm.
And this is one way of just probably explaining some of the stuff very quickly if you give the right prompts, you know?
Right. And even there are a lot of, anytime you're using any kind of technology,
Yeah,
obviously there are types of limitations and
sure.
and all that. I'm working with a client right now that they're have Oracle technology in there for their enterprise performance management, and they have multiple applications and similar data is getting loaded into both of them. And they're saying, hey, how do I know that the data
Yeah,
that's going into application A is the same as the
exactly.
data that's going into application B? And you look at the limitations of what these tools provide you out of the box to be able to do those comparisons.
Yeah.
I'm building a utility right now that I'm going to open source it and give it
Mhm.
away to the community. But to be able to do these types of checks between different applications, and I had ChatGPT write the code to
Wow.
go and build that checker for me. So I was able to get to the result because I knew what to ask it. And when the results
Yeah,
came out that didn't work, I was able to help it troubleshoot where the gaps were in why it didn't work. But it's a very powerful platform to be able to use. Today it's macros, tomorrow it's code, the day after
yeah.
it's write my blog posts for me, and and all that. And
Fantastic.
it can
Yeah.
do a lot of different things.
I mean, I've done as an example a mapping even, like where source data came from. This is the
Hmm.
CSV file I've got. This is the mapping file, and it identified very quickly where those what their data came from. Which way
Right.
had.
Right. I mean, along the lines of mappings, I because I'm also kind of in the process of writing a mapping kind of utility, and so I just wanted to see how good it was, and I put in some source data, I put in some target data. I said, here's how the data came in, here's how it went out.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me in English what mappings occurred to get from A to B? Right.
Yeah.
And it did it. And it told me in English. I said, hey, now can you write the SQL code for it to go and do it? It went and wrote the SQL code in order to perform the mappings. And then I
Yeah.
said, you know what, like this is good, but let me just try to like mess with it a little bit. And I said, here's a source file, here's a target file. The headers are all messed up, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like I have ABC here,
Yeah.
XYZ over there. Like I want you to look at the data in these files, and you tell me based on the data which column maps to what column and what transformation was applied. Because I also like prefix things, and
Yeah.
I said, how good can this thing be? And it went and it did it, and it found out. And for a person to be able to go through, I mean, how many hours do you have to start combing through
Completely. Yeah.
sample data to be able to say, okay, I see you prefixed, your accounts with AC underscore over here, and I see that you have an email address in this field here, and this one seems to be asking for email. So let me do that matching, and in a matter of seconds,
Yeah.
it was able to go through the entire data set and tell me, all right, here are what all your mappings are. Here's the description in English. Here's the code to be able to go and do it. And now, something that may have taken a couple of days of, analysis and writing and tweaking code and optimizing all that kind of stuff, just went down to seconds.
Fantastic. And also I've looked at the picture abilities too. So you can now take a picture of your report and say, analyze this. It will give you a really good analysis of it. So there's lots of abilities, starting from the actual mappings to
Mm-hmm.
the data manipulation, helping with writing code, but also the output reports, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and then that's quite interesting, definitely.
Yeah, I
Cool.
mean, and a lot of vendors are integrating this into their technologies too, where
Yeah.
you can go create a slide, put a data table on there. Here are my numbers, and then say, "Hey, can you write the commentary for this slide?" And
Yeah.
it'll go
That's
and
what it
generate
is. Yeah.
the commentary, and
Yeah.
it's very amazing at how quickly it got to a point like this.
Yeah.
From you look at where we were 3 4 years ago versus where we are today, and
We are
just
today. Yeah.
an exponential leap in where the capabilities that we have today versus even just a few years ago.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Cool. So, basically, no, thank you very much for that. I mean, is there anything else that you want to show us, or is this like today's first session in terms of the macro elements?
Yeah, I think it's a great starting point just to
Fantastic.
get everyone kind of with what are the basics of this.
Yeah,
If this is something that the viewers want to see more of, I'm happy to
completely.
do another episode. I could show like real world problems that I've solved for clients with AI, or however
Yeah,
we want to do it. There definitely are a ton of capabilities here. I didn't
fantastic.
want
Yeah.
to, get too deep too quickly
No, 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 no,
here, so
completely
we
get
can
it.
like
It was a great
continue.
introduction
But
to it. And also, in terms of what's capable, but I'm sure the audience will be interested in other aspects. But
hmm
also, if companies out there or people want to learn more, or I'm sure they can contact you and talk to you. And there's the element of course, understanding their requirements and things like that. But yeah, fantastic. So thank you so much for today's session. I'm sure we'll definitely do more in the future, because we've shown some of the amazing possibilities there without even really using the power of it at the moment.
hmm
So, it'll be great. Yeah. So thank you much and have a great day.
all right,
We'll talk
thanks.
very
You
soon.
too.
Take care then. Bye bye.